again, I'm Jeremy Warner with a Sage 300 certified consultant. I saw some familiar names on the attendee list, and some names I wasn't familiar with. I'm glad everyone was able to join here. Here I'm connected to our Swissnet server where I'll be running Sage 300, the agenda here. So as I go along, if you see me minimize the server, I'm going to be jumping back to the GoToWebinar to peek at some questions that we have throughout. I'll definitely check in to see where those questions apply for the stage that we're at, but I will definitely make sure before the meeting's over, look into the questions and may have to jump back depending on when I get to those questions. So just a little heads up there. But as you see here, the first thing we're going to do is just talk about the version 23 release notes that I have saved and that I'll bring up here shortly. After we go through that, I'll peek at some questions to see where anyone has anything that I did not cover. From there, we'll start jumping into the website, the Atrix, for if you need to e-file or haven't signed up before. Most of you, I shouldn't say most, I don't know most or how many of everyone on this call that has an account, but I have seen with clients that maybe a prior controller had the login account, and then you came on board, you know, this given year. So maybe you haven't seen this site, but we'll talk about this site where Atrix being the platform built in within Sage, where we're going to download our respective 1099 forms, W-2 forms, what have you, to be able to e-file or print for that matter if you still like to have the physical copy to hand to your employees or vendors. After that, we're going to jump into the 1099s. I just put a few notes that we'll talk about. The reason why I'm doing the 1099s before finishing with the W-2s is because, you know, certain clients, you know, everyone has AP, accounts payable, 1099s, but not all clients necessarily process their W-2s in-house. So I put that at the end, not that that's least important, right? People on this call may be looking at this as the most important, but in respect to clients that don't have payroll and process W-2s, if you need to jump off once that time comes, certainly feel free to do so. All right, with all that being said, let me quickly jump back to see if there's any questions here. Is this going to be recorded for later use? Yes. Jen Mans, our marketing director, for anyone on this call and anyone that registered but didn't attend today, it's going to go out to everyone regardless if you're listening in right now. So good question. And it started recording at 10 a.m. Central. So here, as far as the version 23 release notes, before I bring that up, just show you the Sage 300 version that we're on right now is 23.2. With that being said, let me open up the release notes, because the question, not only myself, but every other consultant, hey, what version do we need to be on, you know, to process our 1099s and W-2s for year end? I'll bring that up and answer that question here. And these documents as well, we'll send along. Jen will send it out to everyone that has registered for this class. So here, as far as 23.2, literally up to a couple weeks ago, 23.1 update 2 came out. So I'll work from kind of top down. 23.1 update 2 came out, but then now they've even put 23.2. You may look at that as, hey, isn't that the same thing as 23.1 update 2? It is a separate install. Is this required? No. Now, when I say that, this release notes, as good as release notes that Sage has put out throughout the years, I like what they did here. This is kind of, they've done it similar in the past, but this is really handy here of saying, hey, what's in this 23.2? So if I click on this certified reports, right? If anyone's having now certified reports, as we all know, you know, aren't just for year end, right? They're throughout the year. So just don't think that, hey, 23.2, I need to be on 23.2 to process 1099s and W-2s. That is not the case. You would only want to go to 23.2 if you're having issues with your certified report. So that was the big change in 23.2. If I went back to that screen and clicked on the following link, right, this gets into 23.1 update 2. Now, if I come over here, you can check your version through Sage Desktop. Oops, went to the wrong place. Help, About Desktop. So 23.2 truly does show, as we see here, 23.2. If we were on 23 along with update 2, it would actually show 23.1. And even though update 1 may be installed, it doesn't show it here in this gray area. Years ago, I've been doing this since 05. Years ago, if you applied a patch or update, I use patch and update interchangeably, it would actually say update 1. So, but just letting you know, if it does say 23.1 on your screen without update 1, don't think that it's not applied. You'd have to talk with your IT or your consultant, whoever installed it, upgraded it, that you're at that level. Let me come back over here. I'll jump back to see if there's any questions at this point here shortly here. I'm just going to make a few more points here. But again, this release notes, you can find this on the knowledge base, but if you can't find it on the knowledge base, we'll send these documents along to everyone on this call. If I scroll down here, as you can see, release notes resolved in 23.1. Certified reports, this one talks about overtime and double time hours. If I scroll down, right, it'll start going into, let me jump back actually to the main release overview. I do know this piece here, the 23.1 update 2, if you go to 23.2, it'll include everything before it, right? But this here, talking with the Sage representatives, and I've modified his wording that our office, ETHOSystems, received, saying, hey, you don't necessarily have to be on 23.1. When I say necessarily, it's not required to be on 23.1 update 2 in order to process 1099s and W-2s. But if a client says, hey, I want compliance with this U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity report, right, through Atrix, then you need to be on this. Let me go back to question, see if there's any questions. Okay, is this going to be recorded? Yes, we were told we can wait until Q1 24 to update since the update did not affect payroll or any other year-end processes. Yes, you are correct. There is in the spring, I don't want to mention an actual month, but I did hear spring, there will be a version, like you said, well, Q1 2024, there will be a version 24 of Sage that gets into the, I haven't seen the release notes. They haven't released the release notes yet to this point. But yes, you're absolutely correct. You don't need to be on these version 23. I just wanted to kind of point out these release notes for 23, the handiness, if you will, of hey, what's included in these. But yes, 23.1, a lot of clients have went up here for Windows 11 and Windows Server 22 compliance, right? When I say compliance, compatibility. As you see here, accounts payable generate electronic payments. So I'll get back to year-end processes for this class, but big thing with year-end classes is, hey, what version do I need to be on? And yes, you are correct. You don't have to go to 23 to process your 1099s and W-2s. Let me see if there's any other questions to that. Doesn't look like it to this point. Okay. Let me close this out. Okay, so like I said, we'll talk about the release notes. If anyone does have any questions on that as we go along, and I see that, I'll definitely jump back to that. I'm not putting a cap and bow on it and saying we're done talking about that, right? If anything comes to mind, definitely ask the question. Here, the Atrix, before we start getting into AP and let me click Control and click. Before you, one of the first steps before you start processing 1099s and getting into Atrix, At the tail end, it'll ask you for a username and password if you want to, need to e-file. So here, you don't need to log in. Now, when I say you don't need to log in, I have seen clients that have been at their desk processing W-2s in person, right? 1099s. And when we get to the tail end, Atrix pops up for the login and they're like, I can't find my login. Where is it? Right? So it's just a very simple preparation step is come over to this site, click log on, test your login. If it works here, then you're set and ready to go for that last step on processing 1099s and W-2s when you e-file. If you haven't logged in the past, I would think most of you have, right? But if you haven't, we just click the enroll. When I say if you haven't, I mean, you very well could be a new user of Sage that just went live this year and haven't set up an Atrix account. So here, pretty straightforward, setting up the username, password, verifying the password, the accounting package. I wish they would do a drop-down list here, but I think every year I try to see over this is I think it's Sage 300 CRE that it wants. And sure enough, should pop up the software vendor here once it recognizes it. Again, that's not something us Sage consultants can change in the Atrix world. Let me find the exact name. I mean, if you type that in there and it doesn't recognize it, it doesn't verify that. So I mean, you could just type Sage 300 CRE accounting, but there is a specific one that it'll actually recognize, but it'll absolutely recognize this as you go through by just freehand typing that in. Here, contact information, your EIN number. I have many clients that have multiple EIN numbers, whether they're different data folders within Sage or different prefixes within Sage. So yes, for the tax preparer information, as you file those, you would have to get your multiple EIN numbers for this. Let me see here if there's any questions. Not yet. Good. All right, I think that answers that. That's pretty straightforward. Enter company information. Let's close there. So once you have that login here, now let's jump into the preparation and processing of Atrix 1099s. If I come back over here to AP, the first thing I want to talk about is your 1099 settings. I just worked with a couple clients even this past couple weeks. If I go into AP settings, one thing you want to look at on your system is, hey, where's the 1099 year sitting? This client, when I say this client, this is sample data on our sample data. We don't have any data in 2023. So point is, as we go through here, we're going to be using 22's data, but on 2023's Atrix forms. And as we get to that point, you'll see Atrix is going to give us a heads up because Atrix is very interactive, saying, hey, you're processing 2022 data on 2023 forms. Are you sure? Do you want to continue? Right? For this purpose, we're going to. But if you get that message in your world or on your system, definitely want to stop at that point. Story I told last year, and I'm going to give it real quick again. I had a client, never named client names, but more than a handful of years ago, I was at their site, and the guy said, I said, you process 1099s in Sage? And he said, no, I don't, because I don't trust the numbers. They weren't correct. Well, after a few questions and digging, we found out. I jumped over here to 1099 settings, and their year was 2 or 3 years behind the current year, right? And my point is, we want this to be in the current year. When I say the current year, at least maybe 1 year back, right? We don't want to start talking that your 1099 year is in 2 years, 3 years. Number one, Atrix doesn't allow you to process 1099s for the next year, right? So when we go into Atrix, in this scenario, it would let us print 1099s for 2022 or 2021, right? So point is, if your system is 2023, which I hope everyone is, but when I say hope everyone is, if you're not, that would be definitely a first step to get into the current year of 23. Once you do that, and when I say once you do that, let me come over here to show. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, but there's a close year and a closed 1099 year. I've had clients say, "Oh, I've only closed the year. I didn't realize, even though it's right there, right? I didn't give them a hard time. I just said, yeah, there's two separate close year here. So point is, closed 1099 year, right? Just like we saw in AP settings 2022, it would bring us up to 2023. For this, even though we don't have data in 23, and this is Timberline Construction sample data, I'm going to click Start here. It does ask, hey, have you backed up your master file? Rather than just click yes, it is recommended to back it up. Not saying that things are going to crash on us or anything like that, but if you say, hey, how do I undo this, right? And it'd call Sage or call a consultant, hey, how do I undo that close year? Hey, do we have a backup? Oh no, I just click yes, right? That is our undo, restoring the AP file. So I'm going to click yes to let that go through. This one, sample data ran through quick. Maybe your system may be a couple minutes. Now here, if I come back over to AP settings, as you see there, I just did the one piece. Sage doesn't yell at us or say, hey, your normal year is 22, but this is 23. You could let it sit this way. I don't recommend that. I would say to close both of them in conjunction with each other. I also say quite a bit to different clients, the close year, the term close is I think a kind of a bad word in this sense, because really you're just rolling the year forward. Clients say, hey, if I literally have had clients say, I didn't close it because we were still making entries to such and such year. Well, GL is what drives what you can make entries to. So even though we closed 22 in AP, we got into 23, GL is going to be the determining factor of, hey, can you enter invoices for a given year in AP? It's going to look at these periods here, open, close, posting period, right? So technically you could go into AP right now, even though we got into 23, and this sample data, I could go make entries into a current period of May 22, because that's where our GL is at. Let me see here if there's any questions. Nope. Now that we have that, right, I'm gonna go into setup vendor. So think of these as good housekeeping items, and especially making sure that our 1099s are going to be accurate. So what I didn't take up before look for you here, but point is on this 1099 settings for this year, 1099 amount paid. Let me find a vendor that has some data in there, right? This year and last year. So this year, now that we're in 23, hey, there was no data in 23, but there was before I did the closed 1099 year. So it just simply moved this year over to last year. So in Sage's mind, last year is 2022 now, right? And then next year would be 2024. So pointing that out, and then notice there's not 2 years from now, right? So now where we're at here, this year being 23 in Sage's mind, next year being 24. Let me take a quick step back and say, hey, before I close that 1099 year, right? The current year was 22. This year would have been 22. Last year it would have been 2021. Next year would have been 2023. And you may say, okay, yeah, okay, I get that, Jeremy, right? Well, if we would not have closed that and got, into current, and then fast forward 2 weeks from now, getting into 2024, and we started cutting checks for 2024, Sage on the master file is not storing 2 years from now, right? So this year being 22, 21, 23, there is no 2 years from now, 2024. So your question may be, well, shoot, what happens that what happens then, right? Well, then we identify it, just like the client that I worked with more than a handful of years ago. We got the year to current, and then what we did is come over here to actually I have to open up AP. Sage Desktop does that for a few different things. There's not a recalculate 1099 totals here, but watch this. If I go to AP and I'm logged in as an application administrator, as you would imagine, there's this guy here, recalculate 1099 totals. So do we have to do this every year? No, as long as you know that, hey, you've been staying with current with your AP 1099 year. But if there's any second guessing or kind of doubt that, oh, maybe last year we were behind a couple years and then we started processing checks in the following, 2 years from now, like this scenario of this year being 22 and then starting cutting checks in 24, just come over here to recalculate 1099s. I would recommend having everyone out of AP. I mean, they could be in AR, they could be in GL, they could be in cash management, but what this is doing is it goes through all of your check dates for last year, this year, and next year, right? And grabs those check dates and populates those respective buckets on the vendor setup. So if I click start here, I'm just going to say recalc 1099 totals while, current year is 23. Oops. Just says this program will zero out those vendor and prefix totals, right? It's zeroing them out and recalculating them. So it's truly matching up your transactions, check date transactions, or electronic payment, and electronic payment transactions, and then updating those master file buckets or totals. Thought that it would show up in background tasks there. You could just say, go look at the printout. Let me go to file printouts. Here's the printout. There you go. No warnings, no errors, just saying a number of vendors processed 66. Now, this is sample data, so your system may have, a few hundred vendors, more than a few hundred vendors, so that won't necessarily be as quick as we just did. That may run through, I'm sure it will run through a little longer. But now, if I go back into vendors, and we won't see anything different, right? But it would put it in the respective buckets. And then back to that story, once we did that with the client, went into Atrix, pull up 1099s, he looked at it, he goes, I won't say the word he said, but he was excited, saying, yeah, those numbers are what I expect. They never used to work, right? So there's that. Let me see if there's any questions to that. No? All right. Let's click, let's see where we want to go next. So downloading the preparation report, fiscal 1099 generation, vendor versus prefix, right? We already talked about, I started down there at the bottom, recalculate 1099 totals. in respect to AP settings. The vendor versus fiscal entity. If I come back over here, so this, as we all know, is the AP vendor record. With the reason why I say that, if you look at this vendor 201 Becker Roofing, so last year, that being 2022, shows 18,518, right? So if I click cancel, close, and come over to this 1099 preparation report, and that's found, this is just the default report under miscellaneous 1099 preparation. If I leave it to by vendor for the current year, now current year is 23 in Sage's mind because we fast forwarded there, but you can go into last year. The minimum reporting amount this year is $600 based on the IRS. If I click print preview, starting in 2023, it's $600. But here, right, Becker Roofing Company, there's 18,518. Notice it pulls in the 20, says 22 amount, has a formula up there to pull in the respective date. There's 18,518. If I click close, cancel, and let's run this again to get that initial prompt. 1099 prep. This one, if I do by fiscal entity being, depending on how you have your general ledger set up, this sample data has prefix A and then the base account, right? Working with the client, they have three prefixes, prefix A, B, and C. So their fiscal entity is at the prefix B level, but this data is set up as, hey, just utilizing prefix A at the company level. So if I jump back over here to AP, by fiscal entity, again, we'll switch this to last year, 600, print preview. Now, if we look at vendor 201, for prefix A, company 10, Becker Roofing, that's $1,500. If I click next to 201, here's 17,018. So at the vendor level, 17,018 plus the 1,500, right, getting us to the 18,500 or whatever that number was on the vendor setup. So this point is, this preparation report allows for you to break it down by fiscal entity. One thing I always recommend here, I mean, this, what you're looking at here based on last year, or if your year is current year 23, and obviously you guys would have data in the current year, right? You would put current year, but for the sample training, right, all of our data is in 22. That's why I did that. What I always like to recommend is put the 600, pick the 1099 year, but if you switch this to all and then do print preview, the good practice here is that now we're looking at, hey, right, see how the received 1099 is marked as no for Pacific Telephone? I'm going to point this out, which I'm sure you all have know where this is at, but I'm going to go to, but hence why we're on the call for any reminders or refreshing memory. Under the 1099 setting, see how the vendor receives a form 1099 is unchecked. That's the no here, and we don't have a tax ID number, right? And then there's 15, 13, 17, again at the vendor level, but this one we ran it by prefix, so that's why that's showing 1363 17. If I go to, just like for vendor 201, if I went to the next company for Pacific Telephone, did I miss them? Oh, maybe there's a third. 22 amount, Pacific Telephone. See how that's showing 15, 13, 17. But here, 22 amount. That caught me off guard. If you guys are seeing that, this is page 1 by fiscal entity. 1363.17. Let's do this. Let's click close. Let's click ranges, vendors. Didn't take my, bear with me, what's going on here? I just don't want to look, I don't want to look past it, because something like this, right, while you're running these 1099 report, we want to match up 1604 Pacific Telephone. We go to conditions, add a condition, and go to vendor 1604. There's 1363.17. I don't see the second one. Let me see where anyone put it. The difference is less than 600. Ah, it's current year 23. Oh, I switched it. Did I switch it back to? So last year, right? Last year would be 22, right? But the threshold being the 600. Oh, for that respective company. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I wish I could say that was a pop quiz to see if you guys were paying attention. Nope, very good point. So thank you, thank you. I stumbled on that, but I didn't want to look away to it. You're absolutely correct. Since we have this set to by fiscal entity, the vendor level total shows 1513, but for that second company, it was below the 600. Thank you very much. Who was that? Bailey. Oh, thank you, Bailey. I know you, Bailey. Thank you for helping out. I owe you one. So there's that with running this report. You get this print preview. I think everyone gets the idea here, and you gave good information. So that would be another reason why there would be a discrepancy from a fiscal entity report versus a vendor level report. Okay, so let's go back over here. Okay, so let's get it. We talked about the 1099 prep report. I saw you guys and gals helping me there. I don't see any questions, right? So I'm the one that had the question there, right? All right, so let's go back to AP. I'm gonna go to tasks. Government e-filing reporting. This is where we get into the ATRIX, even though it doesn't say ATRIX. I've had clients say, hey, where's the ATRIX that you always talk about, right? It doesn't stand out and say ATRIX on the menu. This, when we click this form 1099, this is going into the ATRIX world. Last year when I did the update, it took a few, I think maybe a handful of minutes. Notice I didn't get the message to do automatic updates. I did take screenshots of this updating forms. So when you come up to the ATRIX, chances are you're going to get a message that says, hey, automatic updates. We want to click that. And we never want to say continue without updates, because then if you process 1099s, you'll have a watermark saying draft on it, right? And it won't allow you to e-file until you, so my point is it forces you to click automatic updates to be able to e-file. A question I've got from clients is, or one particular, this was years ago, why is it showing all these different states? I don't work in those, we don't work in those states. And at the time I said that's a good question. Why? And this was 10 years ago or so when ATRIX first came out. So I said, that's a good question. I'm not sure why that would be the case. I called ATRIX later that day and they're like, well, we can't pick and choose, right, what states we're going to download forms for, because if we start doing that, we may miss things, right? And then I was like, duh, right? That's a very good point. Talk to the client, and they said, okay, understood. So point is, you'll see all the different states. You don't have to exit out of Sage 300. You don't have to have all users get out, because we're not accessing Sage 300 data. We're simply downloading up-to-date forms. As you saw there, it didn't go up to that screen. It went right in here, but I have in years past literally ran through the update forms. We'll call it 10, 15 minutes later, went back in again, and it asked for update forms. So it found, a new form or a slight change. I don't know what the change was, but found that change within, the next time I actually went in there. So don't be surprised if it asks you again and you say, hey, I already downloaded the forms. Nope, it's constantly looking to the IRS website to download the forms. So again, when I downloaded them here this morning, it took 4 minutes. Right, I'm on our main server. If you're doing it from a workstation, because the forms are specific to where you're downloading, that 4 minutes may turn into 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes depending on your internet speed. Once you do click close, right, forms have been updated. I have seen where clients just wait for this screen to open up. It doesn't. You have to click close to the update and simply jump right back in. I've mentioned that to clients, and I've had some that said, yeah, I was waiting for it to open up. I've had other clients say, yeah, I figured that, right, and jumped right back in. So everyone's different experiences there. Okay, so yeah, that took 4 minutes, all states, we got that. All right, and then going back, just like we had on the preparation report, if we're not doing it by fiscal entity, you can just leave it, by vendor, and then those totals will be based on the year-to-date, or I'm sorry, respective years master file totals for the 1099. Here, if I go to by fiscal entity, you'll have your drop-down list here for your respective companies, your entities. Just like I said earlier, for 1099s, you can process it for the current year or the prior year, right? So probably could leave this unsaid, but even though we're, December 14th, 23, we don't want to get our year into, 24, right? When I say that, you could roll back to 23, right? So on your system, chances are, right, we're going to want 2023 there, but point is, if randomly you got into 2024 and closed it, someone closed it prematurely, didn't have a backup, and they say, we got into 24, all the buckets, the data is going to land in the respective buckets. I'm not sitting here recommending you to close 23 at this point and get into 24, but I have seen crazier things, right? So if anyone did get into 24 prematurely, you can roll back to 23. I would recommend doing that, recalculate, 1099 totals, and it will recalculate, make sure everything's in the respective year. Here, even though it's a 23 form, I'm going to select the reporting year of 22 because our sample data has 22 data. It doesn't have 23 data. Back to here, the 600 has our federal ID number. If it doesn't, we'll want to populate that. Let's click next. I'm going to just peek here and see if there's any question. And Don pointed that out too. So thank you, Bailey and Don. All right, so back here we have 2 vendors for this respective company, right? This respective entity we're doing. Click next. At this point, yes, you could deselect someone, but the idea is, hey, we ran our 1099 prep report. We found any vendors that were over 600 and then check that box that we want to have them receive it. So the idea there is, hey, you did your due diligence, that, hey, everyone that shows up in this list that would have been on that 1099 prep report, leave everything selected. So my point is, fix the source data to be proper, because otherwise every year you're going to be trying to catch your tail on saying, oh, every year I deselect Beaverton painting. No, I would recommend going to setup vendor and deselect vendor receives form 1099. So let's click next, but by default, it's all everyone selected. We click generate. So it's grabbing all of the data from Sage at this point, processing the forms. Peek again while that's running there. Okay, questions? So this obviously we had to wait for, but that's why I downloaded the forms early this morning, so you didn't have to hear me talk randomly for 4 minutes, right? You already have me enough for this other stuff. So this is the message I was giving everyone a heads up for. At this point, right? If you're getting this on your system, we're clicking cancel and we're absolutely going back to AP settings and figure out why we're behind a year, right? Or things of that nature. Recalculate 1099s, right? Or 1099 totals. So we talked about that, but just giving everyone another point that, hey, I'm going to click continue because we have the sample data 22, but the form 23. So another point of just saying how interactive Atrix is. It's checking your work. You certainly can test drive, right, your 1099s first 25 employees just to make sure. One reason why I would say to do that is if you have 100 or 200 or 300, right, just to do a quick test drive of the 25 next to see if there's any questions or anyone that any errors, because I have seen Atrix return errors as you move along, right? Now in that sense, right, from a vendor perspective, you could test drive all of them, right? See what turns up red, because as we go through this, I don't know if these two vendors in the sample data will turn up anything red, but if you do a quick test drive and you see a lot of red, right, on the forms or on the respective vendors, can you change it in the grid that Atrix generates? Yes, but I would recommend, again, going back to the source data, right, changing recipients' names, right, in the proper syntax, or hey, if a tax ID is incorrect, hey, don't change it in the Atrix world, right? Change it in the Sage world, and then have Atrix retrieve the proper information. So just kind of a small tip there to say that yes, Atrix is nice enough to let you modify data in the 1099 form that we're going to see here, but we want the source data correct so that you're not doing those fixes every single year, right? All right, so then here, we have to verify your TIN number. This uses single 1099 data for this EIN. I don't think I've worked with a client that has multiple data folders for AP. Now, with that being said, if companies are in different data folders, yes, that's different. That's when you're processing 1099s out of one company in one data folder, and then 1099s for the AP in the separate data folder. What this is saying, hey, do you have specific separate AP master files for respective companies? If anyone does have that, certainly shoot me a message and I can talk through that with you and and help you out there. I've definitely seen it and I've set it up for clients in the payroll world for W-2s, where you would have an office data folder separate from your field employees in the main data folder. So once we get to the W-2 side of things, it's going to ask this same question, just different wording, right? Same question. And in the W-2 world, we can generate separate files, the office and the field, and then we can merge them together. So you're only processing, one set of W-2s rather than start moving employees around. Atrix is nice enough to help you merge them together. Let's see here if anyone. Yeah, I don't see anyone put any questions in there. So my point is, I'm thinking that everyone has just the one AP data folder, but we'll click no to that. That's where that question arises. Here, right, the information will pre-fill. If the information is not stored, like on your company general, right? If I click general, now notice this. You may say, well, this has the address in there, right? The data folder has the address in there. Why didn't that information pull in? Well, when I did this 1099, I did by fiscal entity. So my point is, if I come over here to general ledger, set up company, and go to 10, there is no address information here. So since we picked by fiscal entity, it's going to look here for the data address information. If we did it by vendor, it would look at your file, company settings general, which is your data folder level. So, hey, we have it populated there. Why didn't it, populate here? Because we're doing it by fiscal entity, and it looks at that prefix on the data folder. Now, if this does show up blank on yours, am I saying, hey, go click cancel and then jump back to Sage? Do you have to click cancel here? I would probably say just do it, right? You won't have to hear me doing all this talking. Cancel, go get that address on that prefix, then run through this again, and this information will, pre-fill here. So if I do, but that being said, I'm going to click 123 Street, right? You can type this in there, contact Ethos consultant. There, Ethos consultant, phone number, email, right? Any information that you have here. Let's click next. Oops, sure enough. We said Atrix is interactive. It's going to tell you anything that you missed on. And sure enough, one more. And an email. Require a fax. We're filing for our company employer. Click next. Here, it doesn't pull any because I haven't processed anything in this sample data on this system. But if I click add, right, and we come down to the sample data is in Oregon, right? So obviously picking your respective state. Here, if I do the state withholding, I'll go 9. I'm just gonna make up a number. Notice here, if I put it like a 6 at the end, does it yell at me? It actually took that. I know in W-2s, if I click add, the state account number should be entered in the screen as 1 through 7-1. So maybe the withholding doesn't require that. I know W-2 requires the one at the end. But let me just put the 1 here. Click next. Do you have any recipients who elected to receive this electronically? If we say yes, right, we're going to want to have our email addresses populated on those vendors, because it'll use the vendor contact email email address to send them electronically. If I say no, come over here to the next step. Hey, do we want to truncate their EIN number, or if it's a doing business as, then they have their social security number, do we want to display it or put the asterisks or the, asterisks? I'll put the asterisks here, kind of a masked social security or EIN number. I click next here. All right, so here's the two vendors we have here. It has the taxpayer identification number. You can move this scroll bar over, right? If you move it over all the way there, then you have the scroll bar down here to verify any information. If this number was short a number, came through here, try to click next. Yeah. So it says, hey, that's an invalid, ID, right? We want to go back. That's the red that I was referring to earlier. So I'm going to throw this back. This does not, if I change this to 9 where it was originally 8, right? That's a no-no, right? Because now we're putting a tax ID number that's not accurate. It was 8, but my point is this does not, changing anything here does not write back to Sage. It's good practice to have the Sage proper, right? So it pulls into Atrix. Let's click next. Let's do next. And as you saw, there's only 2 vendors, right? 2 separate tax ID numbers. If there's any vendors that have, the same tax ID number typed in, maybe you had a ABC supply, but then someone set up an ABC supply 2, right? Or they coded it, didn't know that vendor was set up and put that same tax ID number on there. I've seen that happen, right? Multiple vendors. If you have the same tax ID number, it'll actually ask you if you want to merge them together. So I have seen that save people before, right? Hey, how do I just get one 1099 when we have multiple vendors set up? Maybe not intentionally, right? But by mistake, right? And not, but Atrix will identify that too, saying, hey, those are the same numbers. So that's just another interactive way Atrix will help you. Same thing with employees on W-2s. If someone got fired or terminated or left, got laid off, and then when they came back on, the payroll person put that, or same thing with vendors, right? Hey, put in a vendor ID, different vendor ID, I'm sorry, different payroll ID, but they put the same social security number. Atrix will identify that and set them up with one W-2. Same thing on the AP side if you have anyone with the same tax ID number, just from a setup standpoint. All right, so let's click next. There, as I'm clicking next, verifying all the income boxes. Notice I had this grid over here. If I move this back over here, right now we can see where it's looking here. One more, couple more things from AP, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to point this out. So here it returned 1,500, right, for that respective company. If you say, nope, it should have been 1,300, even after we recalculated our 1099s, or 1099 totals, and you say this should have been 1,300 because I know there was an invoice for 200 bucks that we should not have been reported from a 1099 total. Can you change it here? Yes. If you do, am I saying shame? No. But in that scenario, you may say, well, how do I fix it, Jeremy? Right? If I come back over here to AP, the more and more I point this out to clients, some say, yep, I was aware, but a lot is relative, right? We'll say, never knew of this functionality. So if I go into enter invoices, and I'm going to pick any vendor here. I'm going to just put it. I'm going to cancel out of this, but let's do $100. test invoice. And we don't have to do a job, but let's say this is going to, we could put a job in there. Let's do 10.5, right? Let's do this labor here. I know we're in AP, now I'm clicking labor, but I'm kind of giving a scenario to say, hey, if we're going to split this out and say, hey, this $50 is tax exempt. If you see this exempt button here, right? See how it flagged it as 1099 exempt? But if I come back over here, let's say 10.502, the materials, right? The materials is not 1099 tax exempt. That 1099 button, exempt button, is per distribution. So if I click accept distribution, notice if I come back up to distribution 1, I flagged it as 1099 exempt. This one I didn't flag it as 1099 exempt. So point is, if we process this through, $50 would be sent to the 1099 totals as opposed to $100. So that's the proper way to get your 1099 accurate, right? I know I changed it from 100 to 50, and then over here doing changing it 15. Oops, sorry. So in that scenario, right, it was 1500. So let me match that up with my example. If you look at this and say, wait, that shouldn't have been 14 or 1500, that should have been 1450, right? You can do that to save yourself from going back in and going change invoices through hundreds and thousands of invoices that you have in your system. You may say, hey, much easier if I just go change it in Matrix, right? And that's me saying, okay, fair enough, understood. That's a lot of work to go back and do change invoices, because we could do change invoices and go mark fields as exempt. But point is, moving forward, right, for 2024, for anyone that was unaware of that button, that's what that will do. So hopefully that was beneficial. Sometimes that gets kind of not communicated to the end users, especially, you know, for turnover or consultants not pointing that out on implementations, right? That may, let me see if there's any questions. Up here shortly to 10 for the first hour. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. Yep, we're at the, yeah. If you haven't gone already, thank you for joining the 1099. If you're still listening, the 1099, literally, I think that, when I say literally, I'm going to click next and just go through the forms. But that was the main pieces of 1099, and hopefully that made sense. I did leave that at 1450 because we're at some sample data. I'm going to click next. Once you click next, then Atrix starts saying, hey, do you want to e-file these, right? 260 per recipient. If I click next, forget where they always change these screens year by year. This looks even, they did more color coding from last year, from what, at least from what I remember. I taught this class last year. I don't remember all the color coding, but as you can see here, where does it say? I thought there was a, cutoff. When I say thought, I know there is. I forget where it alerts you. But if you do 1099 processing before a certain date, right? And obviously we're still at December 14th here. Like a little cheaper price if you do it by such and such date. I'm gonna see if that pops up anywhere, unless they don't offer that this year. But with that being said, right here, 260 per, right? If you want to do a e-file, right, recipient copies, $1.20. I selected no, there were no employees to do the e-filing. That's why it's showing 0 recipients at $1.20. But if you do all the recipients, rather than pay $260 for Atrix to, you know, print it off, mail it out, and send it to them, you could save yourself $1.40 per recipient. If you say, hey, I don't want Atrix to e-file, I want to do this guy here, other options. I want to print my 1099s, right? I don't want to e-file, right? But I do want to print the federal and state forms. Yeah, I forgot this came up. Given the impact of COVID, right, several have asked their taxpayers submit their returns electronically to eliminate likely delays in processing paper returns. So it's more of a ask. It's not preventing you from doing that, right? It's trying to encourage the e-filing and things of that nature. But here you could do a total cost of $0, but then you're buying your pre-printed perforated 4-part forms, right? Things of that nature, and you can print them off. I'm going to jump up here to 1099 e-filing. I do know the minimum, as it says, right, $24.95, but rather than go buy blank forms, perforated forms, I have had clients that have like 10 recipients or maybe 8, but it was, I guess my point is it came to like $18 or something. They're like, yeah, I'm fine with just paying that minimum. All right, so click next. PDF archive, I mean, as far as the PDF archive, you can access saved reports through Atrix. So as a PDF archived, we don't see a penny of this, right, from ETHOSystems, even if we did, right? As far as $34.95, I don't see the benefit of that. I would say no, thank you, but to each their own, right? Depending on how you archive data, what have you. But like I said, even by saying no, thank you, you can access saved reports through Atrix. Here's our state. If I click next, and then from this, I don't have a printer here where I'm working, so but I would recommend just from your, as much as people want electronic copies, right, which we'll have, right, you can print this, use this as just more of like a cover page, header page to put on the top of your employer copies. It's just literally a text document, what you see there. So I would say to print that. So here, as you see here, we have up top report 1 of 5. So it steps you through how many steps we're talking here. It's only this is just the 1 page because we just have the two vendors, right? So here's the Timberline Construction. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the Becker Roofing. Here's the Beaverton Painting. And then the third one is blank. So it's a three up, right? But obviously it leaves that third one blank, or your last page. Since I did the complete service here, print copy. Everyone's seen a printer window, right? Select your printer, click OK, and then it would print your copy for your employer side. If you did not do the complete service and you did the other options for printing, up here would say print final rather than print copy, because obviously you're printing to the forms that you purchased. So print copy, I didn't click OK, right? I'm gonna click next. Let's see if there's a question here. Oh, okay, perfect. I will look out for the, recorded presentations. Yes, Jen will send that out. Here's the federal 1096. With all the information. Notice here the title, right? Ethos Consult, right? Cuts you off at a certain point. So rather than put ethos, right? Maybe put consultant rather than ethos consultant. Here, print copy. I'll kind of rather keep printing this window. You get the idea. Print copy, click OK. It is showing 22 up here because I did 22 today. Yeah, because that's where the data lives, but it would absolutely show 23 for your data. Here's the 1099, the 4 up, right? So this one's the 4 up, and we have 2 right here, Becker Roofing, Beaverton Painting, and then the 2 on the right are blank. Print copy, you get that. There's the Illinois copy, or respective state that you're working in. There's a 1096, print copy. Like forcing me to print trying to force me to print the copy. I click next step and it brought up the print copy screen. I'm clicking cancel. Like I said, don't have the printout. And then here's the payer 1099. I'm going to say no. And then since I did the complete service, what you'll see here, just back to one of the first things I brought up on the call earlier, or on the meeting earlier, testing your login, right? This is a login for that Atrix site. Type it in the username, type in the password. I don't have a FEIN number, therefore I didn't, I've never set up a Atrix login. I've helped clients do it, but point is, once you log in, do password, the next window is going to pop up, ask you for the credit card information. There is an option to save that credit card information or don't retain it, so you just type it in every year, which I've seen a lot of clients do just for feeling better about not saving credit card information out there. Once you do that, you click next. It'll pop up with an AFID number, which is your Atrix filing identification number. You'll get an email within 5 minutes. I've seen them come through within a minute, right? Once you have that email, you can go into Atrix, that login screen that I showed you earlier, and then you could track the where it's at processing, whether it was rejected. You'll get emails if anything comes back. Not enrolled. That's why I'm canceling out of there. Do you want to try again later? I'm going to say no. I'm going to close this. So before we jump into W-2s and payroll, is there going to be a 3-part form or 4-part? Yeah, through there, there's a 3-part and 4-part, depending on which. Like the federal is the 3-part. Now, with that being said, if you buy blank, if you do the option of print other options and you print them out, right? You would be doing the blank form. But if you do the complete service, it'll print, or I'm sorry, it will send the respective 3-part or 4-part, whether it's the federal or the state. Hopefully that answered your question, Monica. All right, I'll peek back if it did or did not. Any other questions on the AP? I don't see any coming in, but if we do get into W-2s and I see a question come in, we can certainly jump back to the 1099s. All right, so let's jump over here to close out of AP. Let's open up payroll. Back to the Word document. Talking about modifying W-2 forms, about any 401k deductions going into box 12. Talking about Atrix interaction. Now, I'm in Illinois. We work, in the Midwest and the Southwest. I don't have any Oregon clients, but as many as you may well know, Sage software is based out of Beaverton, Oregon, so the sample data is Oregon. So I'm just going to, not that the transit tax applies to anyone on this call, but I want to show a quick scenario of how another way Atrix interacts with users, right, and checks their work. And then as far as closing the payroll year and downloading taxes, I'm going to first start with actually the close year and downloading taxes, and then we'll work our way back up to the W-2 forms. jump over here to see if there's any questions. Okay, great refresh on the AP close. Great. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, glad that helped. That more and more, I mean, as I go through this through the years, I never like to assume, but like, oh, clients would know that, right? No, but more and more, and this is no fault to you guys, you gals, right? It's just more of, hey, just understanding, hey, where is your data sit, right? What numbers are we looking at? Things of that nature. All right, so let me go back to payroll here. Speaking of closing the year, right? Let's go into payroll settings. So here, right, our sample data, I'm not going to roll forward to December and then actually close the year in 23. With that being said, if we did do that, well, because the data, again, sample data is in 2022 here. But as far as closing the payroll year, number one, as you saw, we're in May of 22, telling you something you very well may know, right? If I try to close the year now, it's just a quick, simple point. Hey, you have to be in December before we can start closing the year, because payroll, right, has a close month and a close year, where someone like AP that we were talking about just has, well, 2 close years, right, but has a close year, doesn't have a close period, because AP relies on where GL is at in respect to coding invoices or checks and posting to GL. Back over here to, hey, when do we close the year, right? Number one, before closing the year, if I was to create a new report for a client, I'm always going to base it off of the transaction records, so that you can always, even if you got into 24, you could say, hey, let's run this report as of 12/31/23, right? More and more reports are transaction based, right? That Sage releases, or you may get from another consultant, or like I said, if I'm creating one, I'm not going to sit here and say I've never created a file off the master file. I have, but that was more for the reasons of, hey, quick data, quick access to information, job to date totals, things of that nature. But point is, another client, this was years ago, she closed the year, and she was very frantic because I forget, when I say forget what report, I know what it is. I just got to find it here. Where was it at? I'm going to open up payroll here. It's the subject to reports. Where are they at? Oh, tax. Here we go. So the subject to employee. So this report, and I have, I'll use Gary example. He's a ethos consultant. I'm sure you guys have, some of you have worked with him. I know he has a report like this that's transaction based, right? So you can go back to any point, and then some other payroll reports that I've done, seen from other consultants on client system. But the default report, going back to the lady that closed the year, but she forgot, her process was, I gotta run these 5, 6, 7, however many reports. I know this one was one of them, but if I do subject to employee and do print preview, right? YTD, year to date. So as soon as she got into the following year, this was more than a handful of years ago, right? The year to date was blank. Now, I did point out to her, well, what about this, right? Just run the prior, right? The prior one. But for her record keeping and what, she filed in the filing cabinet, right? She didn't like to see the words prior, which I totally get it, right? But she was really animate of, I need to get these reports printed before I closed year, because these are the reports that she used. So just from a close year perspective, identifying what reports that you want for that given year. Can we get that information off a transaction-based report? Absolutely. You may say, hey, how do I know if it's a transaction-based report or a master file report? Well, number one, if it's not prompting you for a cutoff date. Now, I have seen clients that look at this and say, oh, let me do 12/31/23, right? Nope, that's not cutting off transactions. That's just simply the date that's printing on top of the report. Another way for any reports, if I go to conditions and click add, this is your driving record. The first record that pops up here is your driving record. So employee tax does not have a cutoff date, or when I say a cutoff date, does not have a transaction date or accounting date on it. So you can find, hey, what the report is, the driving record is, to determine if it's a report as of date. Let's see if there's any questions on that. All right. And then as far as taxes go, right now, obviously we're in 23, right? For downloading taxes, I always like to sit, rather than do update taxes, for any client, I always go to download taxes and then click update. Because if you do update without downloading first, right, you may not, or something may have changed. Let me say it a different way. If someone downloaded taxes, right, right now or a week from now, right, then when they're ready to process 24, could they go to update taxes? Then it would update what you downloaded today. Yes, but my point is, I always say download taxes, because as I'm sure you all know, hey, within the next couple weeks, taxes may be changing, right? They change all the time, especially going into the new year. So when you're ready to go and process 24, that's when we want to download our taxes. So download taxes, check the box, click start. And before downloading, another thing I always tell clients or take a look at, if I go to tax rates, right, here's federal withholding. See here, the January 1, 23, that's the last time it's been updated. Here today, 12/14, we don't want to download taxes like I'm doing now, right? But we're in sample data. I'm going to do download taxes and update. Click start. Selected to update taxes, the backup current tax, right, will overwrite the existing one. So we don't want to do this download taxes until we for sure done processing, all of 23. I have another quick story once this finishes here. When I say a story, the story is meant to help you in your situations, right? So before I tell that, let's go to taxes, tax rates. Okay, so see here, it's still January 23, but with that being said, the taxes, that's the first time me downloading taxes for 23, or I'm sorry, for 24. But point is, even though nothing's changed, I'm almost certain federal withholding would change. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But my point is, I always like to take a before and after look to make sure that we got the up to date taxes. If this changes to 24, when those, obviously we're 12/14 here, we're not there yet for 24. I'm thinking maybe within a week or so. If I click cancel, come over here. The other thing we have to be conscious of, oops, I'm going to go back to Illinois, right, is updating the percent and limit. I've had many clients download taxes, click update taxes, but then they didn't come back in here and update their, percent and limit. So this percent is per company, right? Per company, and changes year by year. That download does not know who does not know company ABC, pseudo rates. So point is, you have to go into each respective state for your unemployment and update those based off your yellow sheet or your tax sheet that you received. So download and update the percent. All right, and then as far as downloading those taxes, like I said, make sure everything is posted, right? If I go to check activity and look at the new file, right? These are all processed. Point is, we would not want anything in the new file. We want everything posted through, printed and posted, so that when you're ready to do 24, right, that's when we're going to download taxes. Client that I said a quick story on, they did the download taxes for the next year, right? Everything was posted through, that was great. And then 3 weeks into January, right, we were ready to do the W-2s. And when we did the W-2s here, it was the first time she was going to be doing them. And she said, is it going to be easy, right? And I said, well, I'm going to be there, I'm going to help, right? But yes, Atrix is slick, right? It's very, user friendly, right? My point is, when we did the federal e-filing reporting, one employee out of 100 or so turned up red because their Social Security amount was off, was not within the given dollar for the 4.2 or 6.2%. She let me have it, right? Hey, you said this was what's happening? What's this red, right? Well, I said, let me look into it. After looking into it, asking questions, right? Come to find out, oh yeah, so-and-so, we shorted them $6, or sorry, not $6, 6 hours from the prior year. So what they did, once they got into the next year, they added 6 hours through enter checks, right? I forget if they voided the check and then re-entered it, or just entered a second sequence check. Point is, that was the time around 2012 where the Social Security went from 6.2 to 4.2 and then back and forth, right, for that given year. Well, since they had already downloaded the taxes, it threw off the Social Security limits. Well, after we identified that, then we had to go into enter checks and enter I think it was like negative, if I remember this correctly, roughly $8, a negative $8 in the Social Security tax in order to get within that $1 threshold, right? So that then when we process W-2s, that guy didn't turn up red. So my point is, Atrix is picking up on stuff like that, right? Especially taxes, catching thresholds, and that's kind of me tying that into as far as download taxes. Once we download taxes and update them, right, we're not doing anything in the prior year. Now, when I say not doing anything in the prior year, unless can manually calculate what the taxes should be, right? But that client was in the mindset, oh, I'm modifying the prior year, right? Didn't think about that repercussion of that. So hopefully that story kind of helps you understand when you download and move forward. All right, so let's go back here. Before we go into Atrix W2, I'm going to come over here to go Tools, Modify Forms, W2 Forms. So that was just under Tools, Modify Forms, W2 Forms. If I click List, as you can see here, sample data just calls it default. I've had clients that deleted default and typed in W2. I've looked at clients' systems that they've named it 2001, 2002, 2003, and have like a laundry list of years all the way down. I mean, I would recommend just having one and then update it every year. Does it hurt to have multiple ones? No, it's just then you're having to recreate your W-2s forms every year. So here, controls 0.01 or 1 penny. Notice here the taxes all come in, right? But what we're going to talk about here is for the 12A. So Atrix needs to see it doesn't need to see anything in here, but to retrieve that respective information, even though this is an Atrix, as we see here, this is Sage Tools Forms, Atrix does go and look at this still. So I don't have anything in box 12, right? So I'm going to click close. I'm going to quickly go over here. I'm going to go to Federal E-Filing Reporting. Here, where is it at? So even this, look at this. So see how it says 22? It's still Atrix hasn't released the 23 W-2s. Why? Because hey, we're December 14th, right? They're doing whatever they need to do on finalizing that. So we don't have, unless I'm incorrect here, there's a 23 W4. Yeah, there's no 23 W2. But when there is, I don't know exactly when they're going to do it, but I can promise you it'll be before the end of the year. Once we go into federal e-filing reporting, it'll say automatic update, click automatic update, and then you'll absolutely see the 2023 here. So for now, right, for this, walking this through, we want to make sure we grab 23, but for this, we have to do 22 because that's the form available at this point. Employees to process, it's going to do all employees that are over a penny, right? Because even at this point, it looked at that modify forms, W-2 forms. I'm going to click next. It's going to grab all the information. Almost there. So I'm gonna run through this twice. So I'm gonna click through these kind of quick, but then as I come through the second time, again, notice this, right? Year 22, but this form is for year 23. Periods for 22. Interesting. Here's another one because I literally selected 22, but it says this form is for 23. Unless my eyes were deceiving me. I'm going to run through it again, so I'm going to look at that. I mean, again, Atrix is being interactive, but I thought for sure that said form 22. Here, you can do the test drive of all employees. Like I said, if you can just want to rattle through that real quick on your end, just even though we're not at the end of the year, or you're not ready to process W-2s yet, you can do that test drive again to see if anything turns up red, so that you can, talk with your consultant, or if you can figure it out on your own, or if you can't, talk with the consultant, right? So that you have a heads up on anyone showing up as red, right? Here for this, where I'm going to go to no thanks. Let's go next. Here's our EIN number. So this is what I was talking about earlier about the let's see here, if I do open company. So this is all sample data, but imagine this Gold Coast group saying, office payroll, and this one, was Timberline Construction. So my point is there's office employees in there because, hey, based on security, we don't, the person entering payroll, right, handles the field, but then someone, their superior, if you will, right, handles the management employees, want to keep that confidential. My point is, if this was set up as your office payroll, and had them separated out, that's where this comes in to say, yes, I use multiple payroll data files for this EIN. So we would run through this twice, save the respective report. I'm actually going to show you that real quick, because I would think someone on this call has that scenario. If you don't, your option is just saying, nope, all my payroll employees are in the single file, right? So I'm going to say yes to this to show you here that if I click save, right, save the process data file for use in a combined filing. So what I recommend here is if we went into the office first, it doesn't matter if you go in the office or field first. But let's say we went into the office, right? We have the year 23 on there, right? Office employees. Click OK, right? And notice it saves that file for those employees that we selected on that first screen. So once you do that, click close, come over here to open company. That was a scenario that we were just in office, right? Then you would come back into the field or vice versa, either one. Click in your main field employees. Oops, payroll open down here. Go back into federal e-filing reporting. Yeah, that still says 22. Down here I see the 23s. Obviously for 941s because we got to do that first quarter, right? Interesting. I'm selecting 22, year 22, and it still gave me that message. Maybe Atrix somehow, as interactive and as slick as it is, maybe somehow it's saying, hey, we're doing 23, but that's the first time I've seen something like that happen. Let's see. Here, no thanks. Let's start processing them. EIN number. Again, yes, I use multiple payroll data files. And then here, right, as if, not as if, but when we were in here, field employees, right? So now we just generated two files, one called office, one called field, right? Notice how I'm checking both of those. Here we would click merge, right? Have you included payroll data files with all employees, right? It's just asking, hey, are we missing anyone? Nope, we got everyone. Now watch this here. So it's merging those two data files. Look at this. Found 51 duplicate files or employees. Well, the reason why it found 51 duplicate is because I created two separate files with the same employees. So I don't have, we don't have office broken out. I'm just doing this for anyone on this call that has office and field in two separate ones. So you won't receive this message if you go into one, call it office, then go into field, call it field, select both of them and do merge, right? So at this point, I'm going to click no, but what that would do, like I said, I'm going to run through this a couple times. What that would do is it would open up the screen with the merged employees on one. I'm gonna walk this back through from a single file data, but I did want to point that out if anyone on this call needed help with that. And if you do, just knowing that, hey, that's there, we can absolutely help you walk through that step. Okay. All right, no thanks. Let's go back here. I don't even have a guess of, hey, how many people on this call have multiple or single, but I mean, single would be the most typical, we'll call it. Here's our information again, right? So I click next. Notice here we're at the data folder level, right? So just like I said in AP, if we did it at the vendor level, it would have grabbed our information from the general information. Payroll is just to this one level. That's why I grabbed it from the general screen. I'll put in my name here. To be honest, I do not know. I don't even want to try to guess at an answer of why AP 1099s would require, right, the email, phone number, but then payroll doesn't. I don't think I shouldn't say I don't think. I've never asked that question. I mean, I would recommend filling this information in, even though it didn't force me to do it like the AP side. Filing for the company, click next. All right, just like I said, things will show up as red. Here, if I click edit, the state account number should be entered in the screen as, whatever the number is, and then ending in a 1. So here, by putting a 1, it's going to say that's not the right number when it had the 6. If I come here, click edit, I'm just going to make up a number here. And then notice here, if I click next, this is what I first saw last year. Again, I don't work with any clients in Oregon. I don't believe anyone on this call is from Oregon. It should be either, Midwest or Southwest, but if anyone does need to process any W-2s for Oregon that may work in that state, employees, you would see a message like this. Or if you're in a different state that has different tax filing rules that you have to comply with, Atrix is there to help you, right? So this is talking about the Oregon Department of Revenue saying, hey, it requires a statewide transit tax, right, withheld in box 14. So if I click OK and I click add down here, I'm going to comply with going through this process here. The group is not required, that's grayed out. But if I come down here to like statewide transit tax and click OK, now if I click next, that's just saying that the state of Oregon has no W-2 reporting requirements for WFEMP. That's the one that was in the screen when I first went in. It said, hey, you need the transit tax. I left the assessment employee there just because it was there. So point is, this is not an error. This is just saying, hey, what you have there is not required. So now it lets me pass through. So here, do we have any employees that are exempt from Social Security or taxes? I'm going to click no. Clergy, right? Control numbers. Do we want to use control numbers on your W-2s? It's not required. As for you to talk with your tax, if they prefer control numbers, you can define your control numbers, whether your control number is simply 1 through 4 or 1 through 4, sequential 1 through however many employees you have, or if you want to use your employee IDs as the control numbers. Here, I'll just say yes, just so I can show you that. And then also, do you have any employees who elected to receive W-2s electronically? If you say yes, that pulls in the information from the employee record, the email. One client years ago, before Sage came out with the email address on this general screen, that wasn't always around. I forget what year they put that in. I keep saying a handful of years ago, more than a handful of years ago, clients used to store the email address on the custom field record, right? And they always just left it there rather than get it back over here. My point is, they said, hey, how do I use that custom field for the electronic? I said, unfortunately, you can't. Let's just go through Microsoft Access. Let's copy those custom fields email addresses and let's go populate it where Sage wants it, the general. So if anyone has that scenario, we can certainly help, move those over if you decide to email W-2s. I'm going to say no for now. Click 941. I'm going to click next. If there's any third party sick, if you want to mask your social security number, right, which most clients do, right, just from security purposes, whether you use X or asterisk, just a personal preference. All right, so I'm going to maximize this. Let me check to see if there's any questions. I don't see any. About 53 still on, so that's good. Thanks for sticking with this. Hopefully this has been beneficial here. I'm going to expand this over, right? We're at the employee information, right? Whatever's highlighted blue just means that's the stage we're at. If you need to get over here and start scrolling through for the retirement plan, these check boxes, right? This is being retrieved from the employee setup for that retirement checkbox. Let me show you that if you don't already know. Oops, right here. So this retirement plan, right, whether it's checked, you need to have that checked on the employee record, then it will pull in here, right? I have had clients that say, oh, I got to check this guy, right? Again, can you do that? Yes. If you do that, am I saying shame? No, but I would recommend going through your employee setup, right? So that every year you're not trying to figure out at that time which box, if we need a checkbox 13 for the retirement. I'm going to click next, right? That's what we were just talking about there. If I click next, I did mention earlier when we were talking AP, if there's any employees, right, with the same social security number, right? Obviously in the real world, everyone should have their own, right? Everyone does have their own. But my point is, if someone just reiterating this, if someone got terminated early in the year and then the payroll person set them up again and forgot about Joe Schmo, right, and set them up with a new employee ID but with the same social security number, Atrix will pick up on that and say, hey, do you want to merge this employee into one? And we would say yes. So that's pretty slick. That's saved a lot of people some headache that had that scenario happen to them. I'll click next. Now here again, we can take this scroll bar and drag it over to the left, right? It's checking federal, bringing all of our taxes. This is right here, the Social Security wages, or actually I think it was the withheld. So here, this 22609 for that story that I told earlier was 218 or 234, I forget which way it went, right? But point is, it showed up red and it didn't let us change the number in there. We had to go, like I said, identify what the issue was. We fixed the data in Sage, came back in, and all was good there. Notice here, see this box 7, then it jumps to box 14. Oops, when I click it, it thinks I'm trying to type in there. But notice how there's no box 12, right? You say, oh wait, my 401k needs to be in box 12. Well, rather than come up here and then insert column, right, new column name, rather than do all that, I won't do as much talking as I did that first time through, but I'm going to quickly come over here, back to modify forms, W-2 forms, click list, default, amounts. So something like this, right, 12A, let's put the D, and then the deduction, right? We go into our deductions in Sage, 401k, right? If you have any other, ones that need to be in box, any of the other boxes in 12, or even in this box 14. Oops. Over here it lets you just type the D. Over here doesn't like you to type in there. You have to click text. So if I do that Oregon state tax, I think it was this. Come over here and let's go to formulas because it doesn't show taxes there, but I'm gonna randomly grab this PR local tax ID, but you would have your specific local tax ID that you wanted to bring in there, through payroll formulas. If I click, or public formulas for that matter, if you set them up. But notice here, just added that, save, close. And like I said, I'm going to click through what we just did in a more timely fashion because we're not going to be merging data or anything like that. I'm just going to go 22, next, generate. Continue. While that's running, let's see if there's any other questions. I don't see any new questions. Okay, so Amy left. She was probably here just for the AP, so that's good. No thanks. Let's see. Processing next. Single data folder. Let's throw my name in there. Just typing this for good practice, just to show we want to type this information in. I'll do this real quick, and then we'll show you a point of, like I said, running through this again. Is I want to show you the box 12 data that pulls in there. Here, Oregon. Tax name. Yes, we know that. No. This time I won't do the, just leave those as no. Click box 941. Again, if you have any third party sick. Let's do this. We'll wrap up in the next 10 minutes and then probably wrap up the W-2s in the next 5 or so to see if anyone has any questions, but I haven't seen any new ones come in. So, but here, if I click next again, jumps this over here. Like I said, we can move this scroll bar over. But now, since under tools W-2 forms, we put 12 in box 12, right? Now we have our numbers populated in here. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to click next. Checking the wages for the state. And look at this. The Oregon Department of Revenue requires reporting of statewide transit tax. Okay, we know that. Within box 14 of the form, labeled as ORSTTT. Okay, we know that. I wasn't expecting this. I put 14 in there. Don't tell me it needs an amount in each one. So even though this doesn't apply, unfortunately, right, we're in sample data, I'm just going to put one in here, but obviously we would need to identify what the issue is, right? But I'm not going to troubleshoot Oregon state transit tax. If anyone is in Oregon and needs help with this, or if it's not pulling in, we can absolutely help with this. I don't know I've learned about the Oregon state transit tax last year, but I can promise you I didn't start studying up on it. Been busy trying to keep up with everything else, right? But I'm just going to type one in here. Let's see. Now, if it yells at me about saying that's not a threshold for the tax, almost there. Thanks for holding on here. Interesting, right? Glad that it didn't say, hey, the transit tax has to be a certain percentage of the, tax withheld or anything like that, but needed something in there. So obviously, I'm not recommending just putting dollars in on your system. If something like that comes up, we'd have to dive into that respective tax, tax requirement there. So let's click next. Just like we talked about on the AP complete W-2 filing service, right? $260 per employee. There's our total there. Again, could you come down here to other options? Print W-2 employees, print federal, right? Notice here that total is 6120. If I try to deselect the e-filing, right, it's still going to push you to try to do the e-filing. So we do have the 0, right? So we could click next, but point is then you're going out to the federal site, the state site. I mean, can't speak for any client's money, but I mean, as far as e-filing and what it can do and Atrix can do, again, by me pushing the complete W-2 filing service, I'm pushing that for your benefit, not because I'll get $1 of that 132 bucks, right? But yeah, it's slick on what it can do. No, thank you. Let's click next. Again, here I would say print this for your own records as a cover page. The merge. I'm gonna. Okay, let's go with Wendy here. Does the merge employee vendor action you referred to for duplicates only merge the data on the Atrix form? Yes. Or will it merge the data records in Sage? Very good question. Yeah, it does not merge the data over in Sage. It absolutely only merges the data within the Atrix grid. Moving forward, right, the idea would be, hey, in 2024, right, if you had that scenario happen for let's talk employees. Let's say we set me up as JW01 earlier in the year. I got laid off, came back on, and someone set me up as JW2. Going back to what I just mentioned, Atrix will merge it in Atrix to file it under one, right? It won't merge it over in Sage, but then the idea going into 2024, what you would want to do is identify which employee ID, whether it's JW1 or JW02, that you want to terminate, right? Put it as a terminated employee, right? So that moving forward for 24, it's only on one employee record. And then hopefully that answered your question, Wendy. Hello, Wendy. All right. How do you recommend correct employee W-2s, local taxes that show up in red? Yeah, Rena, very good question. If you can, if you go through it and you set up local taxes and it showed up red, we'd have to identify the state it came up on, right? And make sure that we're pulling in the respective data. I've been going back to this example, right? Number one, for this scenario, right, I put in the ORSTT, right, for that. That's how the column was there. But for this, right, I pulled in literally just a random, so very good question. I pulled in this local tax ID. That, chances are, in Sage doesn't have any data associated with it, right? If I identified, my point is we would want to identify the local tax that has data populated. So thanks for pointing that out so I could clarify that. Just for our training purpose, I pulled in just something in the list, right? And when I say something in the list, the idea is that then if I pulled in one that actually had data in it, then it would pull that data in just like that 401k did, right? And then pull in the data. And then if we got any errors, Atrix would let us know, hey, does it require that local tax, right? Did it see anything that, hey, should have been this percentage based off of, the gross wages or what have you? And then we would have to tackle that on how to fix it. But very good question, because, when I just put the ones in there, that definitely wasn't the way I would say to correct it. I was just doing that to get to the next screens. But if you do come across that, Indiana has to have a local tax, but they move and a second local tax gets deducted, but Atrix will not allow two locals. And he has to have a local tax, but they move and a second local tax will not allow two locals. Either myself or another consultant can definitely help you with that. Now, with that being said, the first thought that comes to mind, if I'm reading that question correctly, like you said, Atrix doesn't allow two locals, but with that being said, we can go into formulas, right? And when I say formula, see how public formulas is grayed out? If we go into tools, formulas, and we add those two local taxes together into one formula, right? Then we can put that local tax that combines those two locals on that given line item. I'm confident in giving that initial where my mind goes and my thought goes on that. If that doesn't answer it, then that's where we can, like I said, either myself or you can talk with John Crowley, or I work with clients in Indiana. I know he works with quite a few of them to make sure that solution is what we want. So I will peek back at that to see what your response is there, but I think everyone gets the idea that, the remaining steps of this, right? Print employer W-2, we click print final, has the number of, pages on there. I'm just going to literally just click next. It is interactive to say, hey, put the 4-part in. If it's if it's your employer copy, do you need the 4-part? No. But if you did not do the full service and we're sending these out, yes, you would want to buy the blank perforated 4-part paper. Here we have our federal W-2s, right? The 2 up here. So just want to at least click through these remaining ones and then we'll finish. But before I finish, I'll peek at any responses or remaining questions. So federal W-3, Then after the federal, as you see here, now it starts to get into the respective state. Here it says Oregon W-2, but it would say Illinois or Indiana at that point, or at this point. So here, right, I mean, again, not recommending to guess at numbers, right? We'd want to make sure we were able to identify the report in Sage that we know, hey, what was withheld, and that gets into those subject to reports, right? That we're not just obviously just filling in red, right? Let's see. Again, this is Oregon, so I don't know if it checks my math here. I'll say yes. Let's do next. Okay. So yeah, this right here, right, is saying, hey, what you typed in here, do we want to go double check those numbers, right? Again, we'd have to identify what reports in Sage that we're putting those numbers in, right? Same idea, right? Transit tax reported, right? What did we report on our 941s or whatever quarterly reports Oregon requires for that statewide transit tax? We would absolutely want to put in the numbers that we reported there to match up with their state reporting. So let me click here, connecting to Atrix like we talked about. On the 1099 side, log in, password, put in the credit card information, and then Atrix will give you your AFID number via email and on the screen once you finish out there. So that everything that I wanted to cover for the year end. Hopefully that was good information, some refreshers, and also maybe some new information. I'm going to close this out. Actually, I'll close that out later. Let me go back to here. So yeah, I saw your Indiana has to have a local tax, but they move. Okay, we read that. So yeah, Reed, I see you say thanks. You're very welcome. If there's any, like I said, I know I already said this, but definitely reach out to myself or the consultant you work with. I truly believe that would be the route we would need to take to make that happen by combining that formula. So I don't see any other questions. Thank you everyone for joining. I'll get Jen to send out some of these documents and the recording. So everyone have a great day and an early Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.